So you ready to be done or something?
Yeah. Yeah. So then I could get checked in next Tuesday night. For like the first round, and then the red fund begins, I guess, Wednesday.
What do you mean?
Well, they have to do a prep treatment first, and then see how far that takes me, and then.
They're reduced.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
but I need like a preliminary step, just because I'm not anywhere close to even starting, so. But he's getting so good, you're just kind of like, you know, technically, so. But everything was healthy. Maybe it's more sensitive. I was like, what the hell's going to be here for dogs? It's going to be okay. I'm just like, very
So we can call that displaced anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Codependent on my
Yes, well, you know.
So, yeah, things are sharp along.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm not going to keep. I didn't catch the call last night. I got out of my appointment so late, and it's just like, I'm just so tired and just.
Yeah.
I'm like, I gotta go early tomorrow. I found out, I remember I told you my midwife that I had throughout everything left for practice. I found out week 36 appointment. She's like, yeah, my husband's being deployed. And so I had to find a new provider. I was able to stay in practice, which is fine.
But still, it's like
They had to like shuffle me to somebody else basically. So it's pretty much basically whoever's going to be on call. So that was a little bit of a surprise, but
And where are you going?
damn it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, try to think with the mommy brain and not the nurse's brain.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just know too much. It's Edie.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good. I figured since it didn't come last night, I'd come today.
Good. What's happening?
Well,
Everything already at home, nursery already, and the house all rearranged, and all that jazz?
Yes.
No?
Yeah, like every time I look around, it's like, ooh, I should have that.
feeling right for cancer and for
Anyway.
just having a lot of issues.
Yeah, nursery's pretty much.
Some kind of stitches.
That's just pretty much needed some back paper strips and painted and.
Yeah.
So,
The thing was, when we found out, I found a bunch of rooms that were like in various stages of
so he
like
doesn't stop.
remodeling, so it's been kind of a scramble to get everything.
Well, nowadays, you know the gender, you know, you ahead of time, so you can decorate according to that.
Which basically means we just did plain gray.
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Feeling okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't you see the glow of pregnancy?
Oh, yeah.
I like the sweat.
Do you know what you're having?
Oh, what? Yeah. Yeah, I was convinced I was having a girl initially, and then I found out. So, I don't know why I thought I was having a girl, I just did.
Surprise.
So, please.
Your name is there?
I still keep going back and forth. So, yeah. Still going back and forth.
Well, it's good seeing you. I haven't seen you in a while. You're still working, aren't you?
Monday was my last day.
I didn't bring your food.
This past Monday was my last day.
What's your due date?
Next week. So, but I go and visit patients, and I'm driving around, and driving's just gotten to be kind of uncomfortable at this point, and I don't want to be out, you know, in Corey, and,
I hear you. That was my area for over 18 years.
yeah,
slowed down just enough for me to walk into the door. It was funny. Pulled in, it was pouring, opened the door, calm, walked in, and started again. It's like, Moses.
Right?
Is Cora like that?
Later today.
Where'd you go?
Detroit.
Cindy wanted to go to the Oktoberfest at the Tiki Pig there, and he said, it's gonna rain, I'm not going in the rain.
I tried to go last week, it's not worth it, it's mostly a car show, which they don't really advertise, and the car show takes up most of the parking.
Oh, that was just last weekend.
Yeah.
No, last weekend was the big fall car show at Peak and Peak.
Oh, so it's different this
No.
weekend. Oh, okay, I should have went, well, of course, it's gonna be nothing but a small mess this weekend.
And we took the motorcycle ride, and on the way back, we literally drove by probably 35 or 40 classic cars. And we're riding this way, they're all going that way. There were a bunch of Corvettes, lots of Corvettes.
Yeah, they do a fall classic car show every year. Edie and I went 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. Yes, I introduced him to the car show at the Tiki Pig.
Mm-hmm. It's a nice little show.
And to the Albany Fair.
Oh yeah, that was a thing. Welcome to rural Pennsylvania.
But I took them to the dirt
That's
track, so.
that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, no, the highlight of the Albion Fair was the raffle that the local high school was happening.
Which guns or?
Uh-huh. They were raffling off a shotgun, which I understand, it's hunting season, and a pistol.
Okay.
Always good for a high school fundraiser.
People do hunt with pistols.
No, they don't.
They do, they have people.
No. My stepdad probably killed a half dozen deers with a.
I've never seen anyone hunt with a pistol, ever.
Well-
Bow and arrow
Not deer, but
and a shotgun.
Crossbow.
Yeah, crossbow.
yeah, crossbows are big. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't say that I'm part of the hunting culture. I go hunting at Wegmans.
I'm a gatherer, definitely a gatherer.
Yeah. So if you can just listen out for the door, that would be great.
I can't remember the last time I was in the temple 2 days in a row, but more than 5 hours.
Eager tomorrow teaching. So I YouTubed it last night, and 3 days is, I mean.
I'm here every day. What do you mean? That's good. Well, why don't we begin? Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom to everybody who's here with us in person and also to all those joining us via live stream. Wonderful to reinvigorate our Shabbat morning on this bright and sunny, okay, not so sunny day, but still, it's a perfect fall day, isn't it? It's that rainy fall, and you just can cuddle up with a good siddur and enjoy Shabbat. So let's turn together to page 70, and I'm going to ask all of our friends who are here to really help with the singing. Edie, you're sitting way too far away because the mic won't pick you up, so come on closer so I don't have to be the only one on the microphone.
You turning the other way towards this way?
Yeah, we can.
There we go.
There's actually a microphone behind you as well. So let's begin with Hine Matov on page 70. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. And on page 74, we join in Matovu, how beautiful it is that we create our sacred spaces. And our sacred spaces are both physical and spiritual and emotional. And so our space incorporates a much larger space than just this physical spot here, but also including our online spaces. And so we welcome everybody into that space, how beautiful those spaces are when we join together. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. And on page 194.
194? Well, I know.
Sorry,
that.
page 76.
I'm sorry.
We'll do 76. We'll use the black numbers. Which numbers would you prefer to use?
The black ones.
Black ones are good. Okay, we'll use the black numbers.
Explain again the difference in the two.
So, initially, when the prayer book was created, it was created as a single volume, and they paginated it as such. Okay, and so that's the black numbers, basically.
Okay.
Then they decided that congregations said, look, this is too heavy. The book is just too big, so they put it out in a 2-volume set, and they repaginated everything and so this is the second of the 2 volumes, which means that this second volume starts on page 120, whatever, 120.
Oh, I see.
Okay? So it's always 118 pages behind the other number.
I see. Okay. 100 is high.
And so that's why they put both numbers there, so that congregations with both sets of books, as we actually have, we have some of the large versions, some of the small versions, can follow along. Because there were a number of congregations that said, look, the reality is we don't need the holiday and the daily prayer book because we just don't use that very often. Or we don't need it or don't want it or don't want it at the expense or whatever. So that's where it comes from. And it's nothing particularly meaning or motivating or spiritual. It's
I always wondered about that.
yeah.
So the other would be the weekday Siddur.
Well, it's the weekday and so they put weekdays and holidays together
Oh, okay.
and Shabbat.
Okay.
That way congregations who just wanted Shabbat could do that. And many congregations, I think, facing the cost of replacing prayer books, said, okay, well, for the 4 or 5 times a year, we're just going to use the old book. We have it, it's in decent shape, right? I mean, most of the Gates of Prayer, the larger blue volumes, really, came in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and they really have not gone through their physical life cycle, right? They're still in decent shape. And many congregations bought them well into the 90s and 2000s, right? It was actually only in the late 90s, 96, 95, 96, something like that, where they came out with what they called an interim prayer book, which was a little gray version called, we called it gates of sensitivity, because it was the first one that was gender sensitive. It had no title, so we just did that. But it was in the late '90s, and it was an interim version, that was supposed to make a bridge between the gates of prayer and what was the full, eventually what would become Mishkan Tefillah, but that took about 10 years by the time that actually happened. So it sort of ran its course. So many congregations are still using that also as an option. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's turn together to page 76. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chokhmah, uvara vo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim, galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chavodecha, she'im yifatech echad mehem, o yisatem echad mehem, אי אפשר להתקיים לעמוד לפניך, ברוך אתה אדוני, רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wondrously. Page 78. And if that was the prayer for our bodies, we now join together in a prayer for our soul. Elohai neshama shenatata bi, Torahi, Ata varata, ata yitzarta, ata nafachta bi, va'ata mishamra b'kirbi, kol zman shneshama b'kirbi, modeh ani lefanecha, Adonai Elohei v'Elohei avotai v'imotai, Ribon kol hama'asim, Adon kol hanishamot, Baruch ata Adonai, asher biyado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol besar ish. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Page 80. We join together responsively in our morning blessings that thank God for the seemingly mundane, but without which we couldn't begin any new day. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'sachvi vina, lahavchin ben yom uven laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, bokeach ivrim. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, mechin mitzadek haver. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanaten le'aev koach. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hama'avir shena me'enai, utnuma me'afapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sha'asani b'tzelem Elohim. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sha'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sha'asani Yisrael. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael bigvura.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael bigvura.
And on page 86, we join in our blessing for study and worship. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Adonai our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamlamed Torah la'amo Yisrael. And we turn together to page 94. Let's join together at the bottom. Blessed is the one who spoke, and the world came to be. Blessed is the one. Blessed is the one who continually authors creation. Blessed is the one whose word is deed. Blessed is the one who decrees and fulfills. Blessed is the one who is compassionate towards the world. Blessed is the one who is compassionate towards all creatures. Blessed is the one who rewards the reverent. Blessed is the one who exists for all time, ever enduring. Blessed is the one who redeems and saves. Blessed is God's name. With songs of praise we extol you and proclaim your sovereignty, for you are the source of life in the universe. One God, life of the universe, praised and glorious ruler, your name is eternal. Baruch atah Adonai. Melech Muhulal Batishbachot, page 96. Mizmor shir leyom haShabbat, tov lehodot lahadonai, ulezamer leshimcha elyon, lezamer leshimcha elyon, lahagid baboker chasdecha, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי אסור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, Lezamer l'shimcha elyon. And we turn together to page 106 as we rise for Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkadal veyitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach rutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'gala uv'izman ka'ariv v'yimeru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam ulal me'al maya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitale, V'yitalal, Shemei Dekudesha B'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shihirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Dahamiran ve'alma v'yimeru amen. Baruchu et Adonai hamevorach, Baruch Adonai hamvorach, leolam va'ed. And on page 110, please be seated, and we'll continue with Yotzer Or, thanking God for the miracle and the wonder of the creative process. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, osei shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, Malah haaretz kinyanecha, titbarach Adonai Eloheinu, al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, ve'al me'orei or she'asita yefa'arucha sela. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'nizkeh chulanu mehera le'or'o, Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. We turn together to page 114 as we rise for Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Please be seated, and we'll continue with V'ahavta on the following page. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha uv'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shiftecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha u'kshartam leohot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot ben einecha u'chtavtam al mezuzahot beitecha u'visharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Adonai Elohechem Emet. Let's join together at the top of page 117. When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when to the last full measure of selfless devotion, we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then your goodness enters our lives, and we can begin to change the world. And then you live in our hearts, and we, through righteousness, behold your presence. Page 239. The eternal truth is that you alone are God, there is none else. May the righteous of all nations rejoice in your love and exult in your justice. Let them beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Let nation not lift up sword against nation, nor learn war anymore. You shall not hate your brother or your sister in your heart. Children with you shall be accepted as your equal, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. Why do you crush my people and oppress the poor? Asks God. We know the Eternal One defends the poor and upholds the rights of the needy. Praise to God Most High. Blessed is God and deserving of blessing. And on the following page, page 122, we join in our song for freedom. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot oseh fele, nora tehilot oseh fele. שירה חדשה שיבחו גרלים לשמך על שפת הים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדי חינומך, יהודה וישראל, גואלנו, Adonai tzevot shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Ata Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. We rise together for Amidah, page 124. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi agita hilatecha. Adonai, open up our lips that our mouths may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, Umevi Gula Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Vezrat Sarah, Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechaye Hakol Ata Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach Omorid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye Hakol Berachamim Rabim, Sahomech Noflim Verofe Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bar Gevurot, Umidoho Melach, Melech Memit, Umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman ata lachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hakol. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Keshem shemakdishim ohoto b'shmei marom, Kakatuv al yad neviecha, Vekara ze el ze ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Meloch ol haaretz, Kevodo. Adir, Adirenu, Adonai, Adonenu, Ma'adir, Shimcha b'chol haaretz, Baruch kevod Adonai, Mimkomo. Echad hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu ve'u Yashmienu, V'rachamav le'nei kol chai. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohayech Tzion, Ledor vador. Hallelujah. Ledor vador nagid god lecha, ulenetzach netzachim kedushatcha nahakdish, v'shivchecha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush leolam fa'ed. Baruch ata Adonai ha'el Akadosh. We turn together to page 132. Please be seated. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'torotam berihit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לתורותם ברית העולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לתורותם ברית העולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לתורותם ברית העולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לתורותם ברית העולם. We turn together to page 137. Let's join together at the bottom of the page. On this holy Shabbat, may we draw near to life, to peace, and to joy. May we find true rest, holiness in our deeds, worth in our study of Torah. Let us feed on the love of goodness. Let us drink from the love of goodness. Restrain our thirst for excess, and cleanse our hearts to serve life well. On this holy Shabbat, may we draw near in life, in peace, and in joy. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yirah na'avod. On page 138, we join together in the middle of the page. We acknowledge with thanks that you are Adonai our God and the God of our ancestors forever. You are the rock of our lives and the shield of our salvation in every generation. Let us thank you and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your care, for your miracles that we experience every day, and for your wondrous deeds and favors at every time of day, evening, morning, and noon. O God, never end, compassionate one of kindness, never fails. We forever put our hope in you. And we turn together to page 140. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha. We take a few moments for silent prayer. Osei shalom bimroma, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. Yahase shalom, Yahase shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahase shalom, Yahase shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. We turn together to page 253. And we think of all those in our lives who need a blessing of healing. All those who continue to struggle with COVID-19 in our families, our lives, our communities, our world. We want to send strength to those who care, those caregivers who work tirelessly to keep us healthy. Strength to families who care for loved ones. And healing is so complicated. There are so many parts of us that need healing. Our bodies, our souls, our minds, our hearts, our communities, our world. And so as we join in this blessing that says, God, as you blessed our ancestors, as you gave them the strength and courage to face the challenges that life brings, give us that strength too. Give us that courage and that strength to walk this path. And we especially call to mind those who need healing in our congregation. Greg Bennett, Michael Byron, Scott Gordon, Rebecca Gottlieb, Julian Howell, Thomas Kostinis, Phyllis Levin, Jacob Adams, Pat Hanna, Irene Chervetskaya, Zachary Jackson, Dane Marcinowski, Berko Shervetsky, Debbie Perry, Bruce Harrell, Sasha Leopold, Andrea Kempner-Blake, Marcia Pinsky-Koblitz, Joe and Penny Maloney, the Rodland family, Matea Press, Jack Hall, Joe Riley, Joseph Besetner, Edie Francis, Fran Porras, Frank Fusaro, Jim McCann, Sheila Cohn, and Jerry Penn. If anyone would like to add a name and you are joining us via our live stream, please add a name into our chat box. If you are here in person, please share whatever name you wish.
Linda Casaros and Cheryl Perry.
And so we join in Mishaberach Lecholim, our prayer for healing. Mishaberach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha Imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misher berach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. This morning's Torah portion, all about journeys. We talked a little bit last night. Let's see here. There we are. So it's on page 91 of the Plaut, if you have that with you. If not, they're right outside. You can grab one. I thought for a few minutes we would take a look at the Torah portion because in our Torah study we are going to be studying the book of Joshua. So we're going to continue that study. So we'll take a look at our weekly portion now and then move into Joshua in just a few moments. And we'll Thanks, Brad. Sorry?
Some of these are different.
Some of the pages are different. There are, again, just to make life interesting, there's the original version and a revised version just a few years ago. And so if you probably 8 or 9 years ago, actually, but you can see the difference. It says revised edition on the front. And if it doesn't say revised edition, you're on your own for page numbers. I always thought the pagination in the original version was purposeful because Bereshit, the first story of creation, started on page 18. I thought it was intentional, maybe not. Let's see the front, Edie? No, I think that's the original version. And I grew up with Gunther Plaut. He was the rabbi at the synagogue in Toronto I grew up with, and the author of the book. So it was always a treat to go, to go around and say, well, my rabbi wrote the Torah. Actually, his one complaint in the original version, and probably in this one too, is that as he got older, the pages are these terribly thin pages, and so as he got older, he couldn't turn the pages. He couldn't, So his one thing was, I can't even read my own book. Actually, initially, the book was published as a 5-volume set, and was never intended, actually, initially, to be used in the synagogue setting. Published in the 70s, early 80s, and it was not designed to be used as a synagogue book as part of services, which is why you have the Torah, each of the full books, and then the selections of Haftarah, which follow at the end of each of the books in the original version. And then it also did not have any of the breakdowns for the parsha. It went, more or less according to the chapters. It was only later that we put in the parsha designations and separated out by parsha versus just by chapters. Which is an interesting kind of evolution, because in the 70s, we weren't really studying Torah that much in synagogues, believe it or not. This was the tail end of the more classical reform experience. We hadn't yet expanded into weekly Torah studies and text studies and those kinds of things. That all happened later in the 80s. And that was a kind of gradual reclamation, I think, of a traditional study process. And now I think almost every congregation I know about has a Saturday morning Torah study experience, some kind or another, or a Torah study experience at some point. So let's take a look at this week's parsha. The very first part of it, on page 91, God says to Avram, he's not yet Avraham, acquires that name in a little bit. So he's just now Avram and Sarai. They haven't yet acquired that part of God, if you will. They haven't become aware of God, so they haven't brought God into their lives, and therefore haven't added it to their personality, their person, their persona, and therefore it's not part of their name yet. It will be. We'll add that H, if you will, or that Hey, which is part of God's name, and that brings God into their lives. So at the very beginning, God says to Avram, okay, get going. Leave. Leave everything you know, leave everything you're aware of, and just go. And I'll show you where you're going to go. And then, in return, God says, and this is verse 7, the Eternal now appeared to Avram and said, I'm giving this land to your descendants. Interesting turn of phrase. Because what didn't God say? I'm not giving it to you. Right? It's like, wait a minute. I'm the one leaving. I'm the one doing all this. What do you mean? And this is the way that ooh, is it raining? This is the way that the text really emphasizes this idea of that the covenant that God establishes with Avram isn't only a covenant with him as an individual, but rather he is the symbol of an eternal covenant. Right? So it's not just with him, but it's a permanent covenant. Okay. So then we go down through these narratives, and here's where we meet the Avram that we're not super proud of. So take a look at verse 14. So, first of all, there's a famine in the land, and Avram needs to go, and they arrive in Egypt, and the Egyptians see how exceptionally beautiful the woman Sarah was. And when Pharaoh's ministers saw her, they lauded her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's palace. And through her, it did go well for Avram, and he acquired sheep and cattle and asses, males and female slaves, and etc., etc. Then the Eternal, impacts Pharaoh. And Pharaoh summons Avram and said, what have you done to me? Now, what's going on? Well, you have to look actually above a little bit, because when, in fact, they go to Egypt, Avram says to Sarah one of the strangest things in the text. He says, look, when we get there, tell them that you're my sister, not my wife. Because if it ends up that they think that you're my wife, I'm dead. Now what's going on? Well, if she's married, they can't simply just take her. But if she's a widow, no problem. It's like that old joke, couple getting divorced, they come before the judge, and the woman says, look, I'm not going to be satisfied till he leaves me the way he found me. The judge says, madam, that's impossible. You've been married for 30 years. That's a ridiculous statement. She says, what ridiculous? He found me a widow, let him leave me a widow. So, but in this case, it really is quite a troubling thing, because, this is Avram essentially saying, okay, look, you're going to essentially, be taken by Pharaoh and used, as a sexual object, basically. Hope it's not too troubling for you. And by the way, I'll be collecting the riches here. So of course, as this plays out, Pharaoh eventually.
I don't get it. Why, if they knew that she was married, why would they kill him? Well, what's their reason for killing him?
So they can have her.
So they can't take her if she's married.
Right.
If she's a widow, it's fine.
Right.
Honor the covenant of marriage, but not honor someone's life.
Correct.
Yeah.
That part's, the marriage part's important. You can't take a married woman,
Right.
but you can solve the problem.
No big deal.
But you didn't do it.
Right, which is this, kind of, what? Sort of conversation, because what do you mean you can just,
Well, that still happens in the Middle East. In some cultures, that still happens in the Middle East.
I mean, I guess, it's a,
Okay.
but again, it really points out the, and I think the text is, I mean, okay, so the questions really are, why is the text telling us this story, right? What import does the story have for us? Why, what's the point?
Well, if he left home with nothing, and then he all of a sudden ends up with, it said, cattle and sheep, et cetera. So,
But why okay, that's the story,
Right.
but why do we need it in the text? Right? Why couldn't the text have been, God tells Avram and Sarai to get going, they go, they arrive in Israel, and they set up home, and they have lovely family, and they grow, and they have all these kids, and the kids have whatever, and we get a nice community that's built there. The end.
Shows Abraham isn't perfect, or Avram isn't perfect. So,
Okay, good. So it's the humanity of the character. Yeah.
it also shows that God intervenes to say, hey, if you're not righteous, I'm going to intervene, because he goes to Pharaoh and, takes on the family, and Pharaoh goes to Avram and says, why'd you lie to me? So kind of God intervenes to bring you around,
So the idea that God is going to actually act on our behalf,
right?
that's also a good one. And I think also fundamentally it sets up the difference between Egyptians and Israelites.
Foreshadow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what it demonstrates in many ways is an Egyptian disregard for the sanctity of life, which we're going to see again when? In what's the story?
Well, Isaac goes down to Egypt too, and same issue.
Right, so Isaac replays this whole saga, right? And does this whole thing about, tell him you're my sister, not my wife, and it ends up the same with the same results, basically. But then what happens with the Exodus story, with the Egyptians? What do they do? Well, it's one of the things that Pharaoh does to try to eliminate or limit the Jewish numbers.
right, he kills all the
Yeah.
babies and
Right, killing all of the infant babies, the infant males, right? And, so that again is such an abhorrent kind of thought. And so the text is building this case because eventually we need to leave Egypt and we need to leave the tyranny there, and you need to build the tyrant, right? You need to build the case against the tyrant. Otherwise, it's too easy to say, well, it wasn't so bad in Egypt, right? Which is what we do, right? I mean, we do that. Every time there's a hiccup or there's a little shortage of food or water, the people say, "Oh, Moses, why did you schlep us to the desert?" We could have done that. Now we've got Luba, who is making a comment here that says about not teaching the lesson that we shouldn't disrespect our partner or wife, which is certainly there. That Avram's choice here is one that shows great disrespect for her as an individual, certainly. Okay. So we could go on for easily a lot of time, but that's just a taste of this week, and we will turn back now to our prayer book and turn to page 282.
Actually, these are for Torah study, so people tune in to Torah study after the service.
Well, we could, but we're not studying the Parsha, we're studying Joshua, so there you go. But 282, and let's rise for Aleinu. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגוהר עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים, משתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטל שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Please be seated as we begin to think of all those in our world who have gone from this world and on whose shoulders we stand and whose memories we cherish. We are in the period of Shloshim for Jesse Rubenfeld, and we observe the following yahrzeits on this Shabbat: Henry Zaks, Maxine Kalman, Jack Blumberg, Isaac Sherman, Julius Aaron, Rosa Samler, Kate Jacobs, Jonas Adler, Frida Richler Rosenberg, Balbina Oppenheimer, Milton L. Tenenbaum, Rachel Zaks Gage, Minita Cooperman, Milton Nadworny, Miriam Goodman, Alec Fisher, Joseph Schwab, Irvin Goldman, Samuel Sobel, Rachel Davis, Robert Cohen, Betty Jean Kay, and Stanislaw Wizik. If you have other names that you would like to add and you are here joining us in person, please add a name. If you are joining us via our live stream, please add a name into our chat box. As we turn together to the words of Kaddish on page 294, and we rise. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, ba'alma divrach rutev yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'alam u'larmeh almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who grants peace in the high and distant heights grant peace for us, for all Israel, for all the world, and together we say, amen. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. We are going to take a few minutes to just transfer over to our library, and we will be right back. If you're joining us via YouTube, you can stay there if you wish, or you can, I will post the link, and you can join us. you can join us on our YouTube, on our Zoom feed. Then you can interact with us there. We'll see you in just a few moments.
I really like the Shabbat morning service. I'm glad we're doing this.
I'm not staying for today because I've got things I have to do.
Maybe when it's Shabbat morning, we'll do Ashrei. I'll lead it.
You're in. Anytime.
Brings back good memories.
I will see you tomorrow.
Okay, sounds great.
Craig. Things I gotta run around and do this morning.
Hey, I was gonna ask you, a number of years ago, we talked about this. Did you ever get a chance to hike the Minister Valley Trail?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
A couple of
many
years ago,
times.
you said you never got a chance, and something you always wanted to do. And,
Minister Valley,
I
we
heard
used
that
to
a couple of
camp
weeks
there.
ago, and I was gonna get you, see if you and Cinder were interested. You were out of town at the time.
Okay.
So, never went. I've been hiking it for, I know some people that were there for 30 years, and it's a shadow of what it used to be.
Oh,
It's just
absolutely.
become so overgrown that you can't see anything anymore.
Really?
The vista, the overlook.
Yeah.
They kept the trees cut down there, so at least you can see that. But the rest of the place is just all filled in, and you can't see the rocks like you used to see. I mean, they're all overgrown.
I haven't been there in years, but we used to go every year. I love camping there.
Yeah, that's a nice little,
So,
small and, right down.
I've even camped, we've backpacked up in under the hills.
Oh, yeah, I have too. On top of the ridge where the overlook is, that's usually where I stay.
And one time, we brought our 2 schnauzers and, Bobby got loose. And he ran all the way back down to the car.
Oh, no.
And it was night. I had to go down the trail.
Morning service, they're still doing.
Oh, talk about scared.
Yeah.
Well, some of the trees were marked, so and I had my flat, but it was like.
Well, do those blazes reflect the light, those metal tags that they put on the trees? At night, do they reflect that?
I think, but I saw more like red dots and stuff.
Oh, did you? Okay.
So, it was weird.
Oh, I'll bet.
And then hike all the way back with my dog, dragging him behind.
Hello, everybody.
I already ordered the dates. Cheryl's mother's here. She's turning 60. My sister's is tomorrow. Cheryl's mother is Monday. She's in Wisconsin. So I had to buy 2 small dates.
Lots of partying going on.
Yeah.
Maybe you could go up for services and, next week and then.
The Brooks Brothers shirt? What's that? Is that a Brooks Brothers shirt? No, Filson. I have almost the exact same shirt. Oh, really? The only Brooks Brothers. Well, should I have? Well, it's wool. And one of the problems, Filson can make them. Right. I have it. Well, I have to look and see. Because I've been trying to find.
Can somebody joining us online talk?
Round. Any Daniel?
Gotta go to gallery view. Is there a gallery view?
Did you get your hair off?
I did, yeah. Looks better.
Okay. Eric, can you talk for a minute?
Yeah, Boker Tov.
Boker Tov.
Excellent.
Speaker's still on.
It's a nice collection of.
Yeah. Judaica, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we need, we need Joshua.
We need,
Hi, Liliana.
Hi.
Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, we need the Panah.
We're doing
We're doing Joshua.
Everybody though, I see 3 screens, that's it.
I think Liliana, everybody else is in shul.
Oh,
We're in the library.
oh, I see, right, sure.
Hi, Sue.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but I have no idea who we're talking to, so.
You're talking to Pam and Craig, Carly and Brad.
Oh, lovely.
Wow.
Wow, okay, Carly, let's see the,
Yeah, stand up, stand up.
go.
She's standing there, am I? I think the camera's over there.
Oh, it's right.
She's coming to the laptop.
Belly only.
Stand on the table.
Yeah, Carly, yeah.
I can't.
Look at that jump.
Yeah, no jumping.
The Canard's on the bottom of the cart. Where are the Canard? The problem is, I don't know how many we have. We have them in here. Well, we've got 2.
Oh.
I've got Safari on my cell phone. I can just use.
Yeah, I can pull up on Safari too.
What's this? This is the,
Are we starting at the beginning of Joshua? I don't remember if we.
Oh, we
did.
started last week at the beginning of Joshua, yes.
now we need Carly
I
to walk
got
by.
the Tanakh, so what?
Okay, so,
I got Safari on my
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah, so.
You're on chapter 2.
Are you looking about my iPad?
all right, let me find Safari's link for everybody here. Okay, here we go.
Make that happen.
There you go. That's the link.
We're going for Tanaka.
Tanakh.
Oh, that's.
With all commentaries, 129 megabytes. That's all it takes.
Amazing, right?
Are we starting with the first chapter?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I got to download it first because that way I'll have it forever. So give me another minute.
as far as looking at
I might actually donate to them at some point. They ask me.
It really
the
is.
Wikipedia.
I mean, it's an amazing,
It was a really good app. I like it.
It's so weird seeing only 3 blocks on the screen.
I know.
okay, so now I'm going to turn the,
Me.
Excellent. Now we need Carly to walk
Yeah,
by.
Carly, can you walk across the table?
The cat walk.
Yay.
Thank you.
Do that too.
Beautiful.
Lovely, Brad.
that's what it is, impending.
Sympathetic.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we on chapter 2? Or? Can't remember. It was 2 weeks ago. I don't remember.
It's just 2 of us.
50 people per group. So that's a small study. And you want to make sure that there's no surprises. You'd like to see a larger data set before you move forward on that kind of recommendation.
Another thing I really want to ask you about here, regulators are expected to address the Pfizer vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11 by
Hey.
the end of the month. What do you hope to see in the data and what's your
Turn off
message
the
to parents?
TV.
So we'll be considering that on October 26th, the 5 to 11-year-old. What you hope to see is robust data of excellent immune responses and clear evidence of safety, because we need a vaccine for children. I was just on service last week and we
You've
certainly
been
have-
displaced, Liliana. I count on you to give us the COVID update, not some news station.
Is it on mine?
No.
No. No,
It
it's
was
not on
Rob.
mine. No.
It's okay, don't worry about it. We got it here.
Okay. I just lost everybody though. It's
You're still here. We see you.
okay. No, I thought maybe it was coming from me, so I'm trying to close everything.
Here comes Luba.
All right.
There we go.
Okay.
How would you work that with the microphone?
All right, and you can hear okay?
Yeah.
It's a little, yeah.
Mask them guys, they're not worried about social distancing beyond this.
Okay, how's that?
Better.
We
can hear you.
We can hear you. We can't see anybody, but this is fine. But we'll talk later about better setups so that you can see all of us and we can see all of you. And
We see you guys. We see you guys great.
Yeah, but we don't see any of you, so it's a little disconcerting.
No, it's okay. I can deal with it. I just need to bring the different camera and I have a microphone that is better.
Great. Okay, so you're already on it.
Yeah.
All we ask today is you repeat the questions. You know, if the table.
The answers, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so let's join together in our blessing for study for those of you who are just joining us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'sot b'divrei Torah. Okay, and if people here want to make a comment, you can just come sit in that chair and then access the microphone, and then we can kind of go from there. I think we should make Carly get up several times.
Yeah.
The bathroom may do that.
Right. Right. You did very well through services. I don't think I've ever had anybody as end in their pregnancy as you sit for that long. I've never seen anything like it. You're amazing. Sorry to pick on you. Okay. So I believe we got to at least verse 10, right? Does that sound right? Okay, so somebody needs to take responsibility for remembering where we leave off, because I won't. So somebody who is far more on top of things like that, if you could do that, that would be great.
Oh, yes, bookmarks. Sorry.
Oh, perfect.
In the book, right?
Awesome. Okay, so in that very first section, we have the transition moment, right? After the death of Moses, Joshua then is placed in charge. God speaks to Joshua, which is important because that shows a definite transition, right? God is no longer just speaking to Moses. God's now speaking to Josh, and ends that transition piece with this very sort of it becomes a popular or a important sort of tagline in Jewish life: Chazak ve'ematz. That Joshua should have strength and resolute, it's translated in different ways in different times. It could be a sense of purpose. It could be a sense of tenacity. All of those kinds of things. He shouldn't just give up, basically. Okay. So now that Joshua has been firmly put in charge, what does he do?
His orders.
Yeah, he's going to start to give orders. So, and the Hebrew is important because often throughout the text of Exodus and forward, Moses talks a lot to the people, right? Moses doesn't order the people very much, right? What does Moses usually do?
Tell them what they're doing wrong.
All right, right. So you're doing this wrong for sure. What else?
This is the word of God.
Yes, right. So the comments are usually Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Right? God spoke to Moses and said, do this, do this, do this, and do that. Very, very seldom does Moses say, okay, here's what you're going to do. And this is a new way of operating for a leader, for Joshua, because it's here that Joshua, we have vitzav, which is the imperative form of the word mitzvah, right? So commandment. Vitzav Yeshua. So Joshua is instructing and commanding. Right? It's not a suggestion. It's not, this is what God told me to do. This is Joshua telling them what they're going to do.
Well, it's been compared that Moses
You gotta
was
speak
like
louder.
it was compared that Moses was more like a shepherd and Joshua was more like a general. So it was a different type of leadership through transition from somebody who leads by example and by looking over to someone who leads by respect and orders, I guess is how I've always understood it to be. It's a transition in leadership style and leadership appearance.
Okay, so it begs the question, why?
Because they're about to fight battles.
Okay, we haven't fought battles before.
Not as the aggressor.
Oh yeah, I think you have to read again.
Well, it's not a long time.
Well, but I mean, we had the Moabites and the Amorites and the whatevers, and we had to schmeiss these people, and we couldn't take any prisoners, and all of those kinds of things, right? I mean, we've certainly fought, right?
When Joshua was in charge then, he was the leader of the armies, wasn't he? So this is not a change for them.
Right. So it's certainly a comfortable position for him to be, right? He's used to being the commander, right? While leading the entire people is certainly new, leadership for Joshua is not. Right? He's used to being a leader. He's just not used to being the leader.
Establishes him as commander now for the people.
Yeah. Well, certainly, right? So we have to figure out, Joshua has to figure out, just as Moses did, what it's going to mean to be the leader.
Right.
He also has to establish himself as somebody different, for better or for worse. He's not Moses.
So say that loudly.
I said he has to establish himself as somebody different, for better or for worse. He's not Moses. He's different. He's a different person. He has a different point in the mission, a different starting place.
Right. So what do we know about leadership transition?
It never works out as well as it's planned.
Right. Well, part of the struggle of a leadership transition is that each successive leader is not going to be the same. Right? You're going to have different leadership styles. Each individual will bring a new style. Which is why in political fields, you'll often have styles of leadership that are very different from one administration to the next, and people will say, oh, I don't want this kind of leader anymore. I want that kind of leader. And that kind of goes back and forth on the pendulum.
What comes to mind is the interim pastor. When friends, congregations, someone retires, they bring in someone who's definitely interim, and then they bring in the new guy. Essentially, that happened to you.
So there's two versions of this. So one is the intentional interim, and the other is the unintentional interim.
Right.
And actually, I've actually been trained on being an interim.
Oh, interesting.
I thought that would be a fascinating thing to do, and then realized that would mean getting up and moving every 1 or 2 years, and that certainly wasn't what I was interested in doing. So, but the work is fascinating because you come in and you can do absolutely anything that you need to do because you're already fired.
Yeah.
You've already fired me. So whatever you want, guys, because and there is a lot of research being done in congregational life about how to do the interim piece effectively. In the old days, basically congregations would find a kindly retired rabbi who would sort of occupy the seat, if you will, and get the congregation through leading services for a year while they searched for a new rabbi.
That's what churches still do,
No,
not temples.
no,
Churches.
no, churches do not do that. Churches have actually, well, most churches have been very successful at creating really intentional interim process. Now, some do that.
Because here it always seems like the old guy comes out of retirement, or the old bishop sits down and then.
Correct.
Takes
So,
the congregation.
yeah, I mean, but really, especially in the Protestant denominations, some of the especially in like the United, the Presbyterians, and the Methodists, and some of them who have really wonderful strategic leaders. And in fact, the woman who runs the rabbi training program for interim rabbinic leadership is I think she's a Methodist minister that I worked with when she was the interim person at the University of Rochester, 15 whatever years ago. But and basically your job is to open up all of the doors, all of the drawers, all of the cabinets, metaphorically, and let all of the secrets out on the table. Because what often happens is congregations, not synagogues only, but all congregations get into this kind of pattern of behavior that sometimes is not as healthy as it could be. And I think that after you've had a long-term leader, you need to clear that stuff. Number one, so that people have like an understanding, and they've gone through a process of letting go of a previous beloved leader, and it doesn't matter if the person was beloved or hated, because it works either way, because people either love the person or love to hate them.
Right.
And if you have a leader who nobody liked, the mythology is that you get somebody who is kindly, and they'll come in and everybody will like them. The problem is that everybody is used to not liking the leader. And that's how they behave, right? So you have to have somebody come in and kind of work the congregation through a process of rethinking what it means to have a leader and work with a leader and all that. So this interim piece is really, really critical in congregational life, for sure. It all depends on style and whatever. So sometimes that happens when, a congregation will look for another rabbi and they'll hire somebody, and then all of a sudden you're discovering all of these conflict issues. And it could be, and often people say, well, it just wasn't the right fit. The question becomes, why wasn't the right fit? Usually because the congregation wasn't ready and hadn't yet articulated what it really wanted or needed. And therefore it went out and hired somebody who was not the right fit because they didn't know what they were looking for. They didn't know what they needed. Right? And that's tragic for the congregation and for the rabbi that walks into that. That's a really hard place to be.
Yeah, we're sorry.
No, I was fine, because actually you had, Rabbi Bush, who was here for many years. You had Rabbi Emily, who unfortunately became the unintentional interim. And whatever.
So as we speak to that, with the story of Joshua, the people didn't choose Joshua to be their leader after Moses. He just kind of sort of stepped in. God sort of tells them you're there, but it doesn't really enunciate that as much. In the sentence here, he says, my servant Moses is dead. Here you go.
Well, wait, you have to go back.
Okay.
Because all the way in Exodus already, Joshua is being groomed.
Okay.
Right? Joshua is already being named successor. Right? So in congregational models, actually, to just kind of keep the parallel going, there can be successful successorship in congregations. But it has to be outlined very clearly early on so that people can begin to see what would be a junior rabbi, let's say, or an assistant or associate rabbi differently. So in larger congregations, you'll have multiple rabbis. One will be a senior rabbi and be the one sort of in charge, right? And then you might have an assistant or two assistants or three or four. We had 6 rabbis at Temple Israel in West Bloomfield. Each of them had sort of areas of influence or spheres of responsibility or whatever, but there was one who was ultimately the one in charge, right? So at some point, somebody needs to make the call.
Well, it's funny because I missed the last Torah study, but I did read it. And it says, after the death of Moses, the Lord said, my servant Moses is dead, prepare to cross the Jordan. He doesn't say these are your people. He just says, okay, you take them across the Jordan. And then the people have to accept it. I thought that was kind of an interesting transition. It's like, okay, I'm here. It's like when, what's his face, when Reagan got shot and dude walks in and says, I'm in charge. It's like, who put you there?
Right.
Well, I think also in this case is that they spent 40 years in the desert. So there were a lot of congregants who started with Moses and didn't end with Moses. So they have sort of this congregational turnover to follow Joshua's leadership into the new land.
Well, and they've come to live and expect it, right? So they lived their whole lives in this generation, understanding that Joshua would be the leader after Moses. Right. So they grow up understanding that this is the moment, this is the pathway of transition that's going to happen. And so when in fact Moses dies, it actually makes sense, if you look at it that way, that God says, okay, Moses is done. He's not coming down the mountain this time. So you know what to do.
Wasn't there a point in Deuteronomy where Moses lays hands on Joshua and says, it's now yours?
Right. So right before he dies,
right,
he brings Joshua in front of the whole people.
Right.
And they have this moment of transition. Yeah.
So there's no doubt he's in charge. Yeah.
The transition that I'm having a hard time with is that although Moses has been in charge, it has always been, and God said to Moses, this is what's going on. And this doesn't feel that way. This doesn't feel like God saying to Yeshua, this is what I want you to tell the people. And so that's a bigger transition to me than Moses to Joshua is it's from God to man.
So in a sense, God is kind of pulling back.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. And God is saying, you're on your own, folks.
And as you just said 15 minutes ago, why?
Right.
Right. Why doesn't God have a continued role the way God had with Moses?
Because he's prepared the people already. And he said, this is what's going to happen. This is what you have to trust that I will be with you. But you're going to have to take over and be an adult, in other words. And,
Did Moses not have the strength and the personality to take that role? And now Joshua has the strength and personality? Or was it that Moses was never given the ability to take that role and Joshua's always had that role? So it's perception. I mean, there's two different ways to look at it. So maybe God didn't give it to Moses because Moses couldn't handle it.
Moses was a reluctant leader.
Yeah, some people can't be generals,
Right. Moses leads reluctantly throughout the text. Right. He starts reluctantly. Remember when, God says to Moses, okay, you're going to pick the people. And Moses says, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to talk. I can't speak. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't even speak right.
Yeah. Here's my brother, Aaron. Talk to him.
Right.
Right.
And if you want to sort of psychoanalyze Moses, which is always kind of fun, how does Moses grow up?
very privileged.
Trying to adapt to a foreign society. I mean, trying to be
Okay.
sort of like to fit in, basically.
But what's his sort of stature, or what's his position in because he's in the royal court of Egypt, right?
He's a
He
prince
is
of
adopted
Egypt.
by.
Yeah. He's a royalty. He's a prince of Egypt. Servants to do everything for him.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, he's not.
But what is he never? What he never is
never
going to be what?
Pharaoh.
Never complains.
Yeah, but he's never going to be
Pharaoh.
He's never going to be Pharaoh,
No. I mean,
right?
knew
So
that.
he grows up always understanding his role
Yeah.
as just being a guy.
Right.
Yeah, he's influenced. He takes directions. He follows. Right? He's just a guy. He's never being groomed. He's not groomed at all.
No.
You know, he's Harry, right?
Okay.
Mhm.
It's Prince Harry, right? He's never going to be king. You know, or it's what's his name?
Prince Charles.
Yeah, him too. No.
I said Eric.
Lion King, yeah. Pumbaa.
What's no. Andrew's.
Edward.
Yes.
Mhm.
Edward.
Yeah.
Right. He's seventh in line, or whatever it is. He's never going to be king. It doesn't make any difference what he does. It doesn't make anything of what he does. He couldn't get there. Whatever. There's no possible pathway that he's ever going to have to wear that crown.
Right.
Mhm.
And this is I think the way Moses goes through his whole development is he's always told that he's there, but he's never going to lead. So when God suddenly comes to him and says, "Oh, you're in charge,"
Yeah.
Moses says, "Wait a minute, that's not my job."
Right.
Right? I'm just and who, by the way, Moses goes into the desert fleeing Egyptian, and what does he do? He finds his whole life again.
Mm.
The same life. Right? Who does he work for?
God.
No, who does he work for?
Father-in-law.
His father-in-law, Jethro, who is
The high priest.
the high priest of Midian. So again, he's not in charge. Again, he's just underneath. He's like the administrative level of government, right? That they're never going to be president. They have important jobs to do, but they're never going to have to make the hard calls.
Mhm.
But he was comfortable with that. I think he was perfectly happy with that.
Agreed. Yeah.
He didn't want to
He
be.
may have been. He may have been, but God had other plans.
Well, God has a tendency to choose people like that. I don't think Abram really wanted to go off and lead a people. You certainly know that Noah didn't want to do what he wanted to do. So I think God chooses the unassuming for a reason, because they're not going to push back.
But you can still look at it that he's still second in command. God's in charge.
Sure.
And he's just God's assistant. And so he's still second in command. He's never the guy who's making the decisions. It's God that's making the decisions.
True. Yeah. No, that's good
So
too.
what happens with Joshua? Does Joshua become 1A?
Well-
It seems like there's a shift in, as Eric said, there's a shift in the source of the ideas.
Absolutely. Because what's God's advice to Joshua? Have a lot of strength.
Yep, and resilience.
See ya.
Yeah, right.
I'm on break.
Have fun storming the castle. I mean,
And I find it interesting that in verse 2, maybe, that God's words are my servant Moses is dead.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's I mean that, and that's the language that is always used, right?
Yeah,
Moses, my servant.
Yeah, that's true.
On the other hand, Joshua grew up knowing that he was going to be the leader.
Mhm.
So it's not fair to say, well, Moses grew up being just a guy, right? But Joshua knew for 40 years he marched in the desert, and he knew that when Moses died, he was it. So he's had 40 years to prepare himself. So, it's different.
So interesting in here also is the use of the word you. Your territory shall extend from the wilderness and the Lebanon to the great river.
Where are you?
I'm back on 4. So back what you guys did last time.
Okay.
So your, meaning the people of Israel, But then he says, no one shall be able to resist you as long as you live. Now, is that Joshua or is that the people of Israel?
No, that's the collective.
That's a collective. So basically he's saying, now and forever, the whole people of Israel will never be defeated, which is interesting. And then be
Which
strong
we
and
know isn't
resolute.
true, right?
Then it's be strong and resolute, for you shall apportion to this people the land that I swore their fathers. So now it's going, you is Joshua again.
Correct.
It's very interesting. It's all in the same basic sentence, but the yous go from collective to individual back to
Except in
collective,
Hebrew, they're different words,
and that's where
right?
gets to us.
That's where the Hebrew makes it very clear, because the Hebrew uses different.
Okay.
The you in Hebrew is different. So you can take a look at it.
What verse was that?
Okay, so take a look.
4, 5, and
It's
6.
Oh, okay. All right. Or your territory, okay.
so verse 3, right? Kol makom asher lachem, which is you plural,
Y'all.
collective, you all,
Mhm.
right? Right. Then in 4,
It says your territory.
Kol haaretz.
so number 5, no one shall be able to resist you, right? There, it's the individual.
Okay.
Okay, lefanecha,
So no, it was just Joshua.
Joshua,
Right.
right? Kol yamei chayecha, all of your life. So you, Joshua, are going to be successful your whole life. Ka'asher hayiti, because I have been im Moshe, with Moses. Ehyeh, you know, as I have been as I will, or and I will be imach, with you. Ehyeh imach, I will be with you. So I was with Moses. You're going to be successful. You, Joshua, are going to be successful. I stood by Moses. I'll stand by you.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So then 6 is okay.
6, 7, and
Okay.
9 are all
I
these
swore to their
promises.
fathers and assigned to them. Latet lahem. So to them.
Okay.
Right. So then again, it's back to the collective. So it's kind of it's both kind of appease Joshua and say, look, don't worry, I'm here for you.
Mhm. Now, as you're still going, it's be strong and resolute in 6. You must be very strong and resolute in 7. You must be strong and resolute in 9. Is that Joshua, all of them, or is that the people of Israel that need to be strong and resolute? Because literally, it's repeated 3 different phrases out of 4.
It seems to be just to Joshua.
Okay, all 3 times, because that's really redundant.
Mm-hmm. It's all chazak ve'amatz, which is in the singular.
Okay.
Otherwise, if it was collective, it would have been something like chizku ve'imtzu, which would have been the plural version of that.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Now we're back to what we started.
Okay, good. All right. So clearly there's this transition of style, of model, and it is, now, while God is certainly with Joshua, there's a very different way that they're being, right? It's no longer Moses relaying God's words. It's now actually a human decision-making process. So their success is going to be based on Joshua's strategic abilities and not by God simply giving directions.
But God does direct in 8 where those directions come from. Because he says, let not the book of the teachings cease from your lips, but recite it day and night so that you may observe faithfully all that's written on it. So he's basically saying, you have the guidance. I don't need to give it to you directly. You're smart enough to learn it and use it to base your decisions. So it's not truly saying, see you later, have fun. It's saying if you use the word of the Torah, if you use my current guidance, you're going to do okay without.
So you've got the directions or the kind of operating principles. You just need to apply them. Because in the Torah, you have a whole series of laws about what you do when you go to war, who you can kill, who you can capture, what you do with them, what you can destroy as part of the property that you are going to capture. All of those kinds of things are all there.
So then we talk about psychoanalyzing Moses. Could this be saying that Moses wasn't equipped to use that and make his own decisions, whereas Joshua is intellectually more equipped to do it without God hand feeding him every single direction?
Was it Moses that wasn't equipped, or was it the people who, they hadn't had any experience with this yet when Moses tells it to them?
Right, but so he needed to say, God said it, it can't be from Moses, whereas they respect Joshua to.
Right, so now, Joshua says we're doing this, and the reasoning behind what we're doing is all here in the text that you have grown up understanding. These slaves who've been wandering for 40 years, that you have now grown up understanding is our foundational guiding principle document, right? It's essentially the Constitution, right? It functions in the same way that the American Constitution functions for the legal and judicial, the political process, right?
Okay.
We make laws based on a constitutional document. We don't make laws randomly. They have to fall within the guidelines of the constitutional framework. Otherwise, they're knocked down, right? Which prevents, we hope. Sorry, was that too editorial? we hope that prevents abuse of the legislative powers, right? Because legislature can't create a law that is beyond the constitutional framework. All right, unless they live in Texas. It's a new world, Golda. Oh, yeah, I can't wait till that gets.
Well, for what you're saying about the Torah being the rules, if you've read ahead, that gets reinforced over and over again. So.
You read ahead?
Yeah. The whole thing, remember?
Yeah. No, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So, and this becomes the mantra, right?
Yes.
Don't forget we've got the rule book. Right? Go back to the basics. Go back to the book. Right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens after the first exile, the Babylonian exile? What's the first part of that story? The book of, in with the story of Ezra the scribe. So they're in the Babylonian exile. They're allowed to come back. What does Ezra do? Dusts off the Torah and reads it to the people and says, oh, when we go back, this is what we're going to do. Right? This is what we have. These are our pathways. This is the foundation here.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, every time that people get into trouble, it's because they forget to follow the foundational document, right? And this happens successively with, you'll see it all through the writings of the kings, etc., where there was a new king, the king does whatever, they forget about following God. God comes in and there's some sort of disaster or war, they lose, and they're punished, and all of a sudden they remember the Torah, and then the cycle starts all over again, right? This happens again and again and again. Which in some ways is a troubling kind of process, because it means that that the people are punished for their misbehaviors, So God comes in and punishes us,
Mhm.
right?
Well, in this case, actually reading ahead a little bit, the peoples accept his orders. They say, may God be with you like he was with Moses, which is saying, hey, he's still there, dude, we know that. And then in 18, it says, any man who flouts your commands and does not obey every order you give him shall be put to death. Only be strong and resolute, which means now they're going to punish themselves. They're not waiting for God to do it, which is really a shift from the 40 years with Moses, where anytime Moses turned his back, they did what God did tell them to do and waited for something to happen. So this time they're saying, we take your orders, we believe your orders, and oh, by the way, if anyone chooses to flout it, they better deal with us, which is a real shift from God punishing people for not listening to Moses to the people saying, we're going to listen to you, and anyone who doesn't, we're going to self-police. That's really a shift.
Yep.
Why?
Well, I mean, I think, if we're to go up to the, 100,000-foot level, let's say, and look down, this is actually part of the evolution of peoplehood, right? Because depending on a divine retribution or divine guidance all the time means that I myself don't have to be responsible for my actions, essentially.
Right. No, it strikes me. This is the human condition. It is to repeat the mistakes and then have to be told, be strong, be resolute, try again. I find very appealing compared to this other guy died for my sins, and I'm done with it. Right, which is a different
other
guy. Right. No, but this is go back to the book, try again, do the best you can, be strong, be resolute. And at some point in the future, you're going to make the mistake again. Come back to Torah and read again. I think it's a wonderful message.
Right? For the sins we have committed this year.
Right.
And every year we go through them. And that's, that truly is a very, very Jewish message.
Right.
That our behaviors is on us.
It's on us, right?
It's on us. I mean, we don't, God has given us the tools to help us make the decisions, the guidelines, the directions, the insights, the wisdom. We just have to follow.
Like the COVID message from the Prime Minister, he said, we're doing the best we can. We're in this together. Stay the course. We will get through it. The same sort of message.
Well, chazak ve'amatz, right? I mean,
At least,
right. Right.
But he's been saying this from day one. We'll get through this. Just stay the course. Do as you're told. Do what the scientists advise you.
He's quintessentially Canadian that way, right?
100%. Yeah.
Telling Canadians to stand in line is like a perfect thing to do. Because then they'll stand in line and then apologize for it, right?
Yes. But it's much the same. It's stay the course. Do what's right.
Is there a reason that the people are so blindly willing to follow to the point where they say, if anyone disobeys your orders, we'll kill them? Whereas always under Moses, there were people who questioned what he said from minute one till he went up the mountain the last time. Why are they suddenly all behind Joshua to the point where they say, we will police ourselves if somebody's out of order? Because Moses used to come down and say, what's with the idols? Not people saying, hey, those people have idols. Moses would come down and say, what are you doing? Oh yeah, no, we're stupid. These people are not recognizing that we need to do this and we need to take responsibility. Why suddenly the shift in Gestalt where there aren't factions?
It's a different generation.
But it's a week later. It's a week difference from Moses going up the mountain to Joshua being in charge. What happened in that week?
Moses died.
So they said, okay, now we got to start different?
Yeah. Yeah, because the whole sense of responsibility shifts. The whole sense of personal responsibility. And it's not overnight, right? Because we have early on in the stories in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and somewhere in Numbers, we have these things that say, look, if somebody does something, you take them out to the elders of the city, take them out and stone them to death. And they, so that's being inculcated into the life of how Israelite society is supposed to work. Right now, now it's rubber hits the road time, and now you've got to step up and actually implement this.
Still, Brad, you think they're going to succeed?
I kind of read ahead.
They're making these grand promises. You think they're going to manage it?
No, I don't.
Get it all right, to take care of everything on their own?
But they've never offered to make that promise before. And I just wondered what the flip was. Moses, when he goes up the mountain the last time, there's factions disagreeing with him then. Right. Why does everyone come together? Because Joshua walks up there and says, I'm in charge. Here you go. Here's my orders.
They all become Canadian.
Totally.
Thank you. I actually needed that. That was good.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It strikes me as everyone fought with Moses every time he came down. They questioned him. Joshua gets up there and says, here's how we're doing it. They're like, oh yeah, absolutely. We're doing it. It just seems like the people changed with the person who was standing above them. And that's it.
Well, this is the beginning. I haven't read the whole book, but maybe they do object or whatever. I think some of them don't want to cross. I remember they said, it's okay on this side. You cross the Jordan, we'll stay here.
This is who Joshua is actually speaking to right now, right?
Yeah, that's who he's
if you look at verse 12. Joshua said to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh, these are the folks who said, you know what, we like it on this side of the Jordan. Thanks so much, but you guys go ahead, we'll stay here.
Right.
And Moses, and God kind of cut a deal with them and say, okay, you can, but you've got to go fight. So you can stay there, but you have to participate in the campaign. And the first people that Joshua speaks to is this group.
And they blindly say, okay.
And they say, fine.
That's what struck me as strange. With Moses,
but they've already agreed to this.
With Moses, they barter. With Joshua, they're like, cool.
But Joshua is simply reiterating a previously agreed upon covenant. Right? Mm-hmm. God has already said, look, you can do that, but you got to send your things. And the first thing Joshua says was, okay, remember what God said. So let's just review.
But they didn't try to haggle. You sure they were?
No, right? Well, I know I said it was going to be, but it's like the ancient story here, right?
All right, I'll leave this to other people to talk.
No, it's fine. But really, there is a definite shift in the way in which this is, and part of it is, is literary, right? So the text needs Joshua to be in charge, right? Because that's where we find ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we know that God is pulling back. And so, therefore, Joshua needs to be seen as the one who's making these decisions, because at the end of the Torah, how does the Torah end? With God saying, look, there's never going to be a prophet like Moses. I'm never going to be this involved in your lives again. Mm-hmm. I've given you all the tools. I've helped you transition from slave to free people. You are now the nation of Israel. You have your covenantal documents. Go.
It's sort of like a parent saying, now you're an adult, you're on your own. I'll be here, but you're on your own.
Yeah, till you move back into the basement. But
you can only hope, Liliana.
I didn't hear you.
That's good.
Sad.
No. I said you can only hope that Rob moves back into your basement. I'm dying. I think we may have to come up next week because I am just so curious about how the first person we're going to meet is a harlot. As we enter, right? And she appears to me to be a hero. Rachav is this, she's going to sort of save the Jewish people here, in the first part of the next, right? I don't want to start it now because it's a.
No, I don't want to start that whole section yet.
Yeah, no, but I may have to come next week to do this in person because I'm just so curious why of all the stories we're going to start with, it's going to be Rachav.
It'll be a good sermon.
But and it's this repetition, right? Verse 16, they answer Joshua and they say, we will do everything you have commanded us, and we will go wherever you send us. Right?
And then the next one says, we will obey you just as we obeyed Moses, which they didn't always obey Moses, which is that's why I find it interesting. Because especially this group, they argued with him all the time. They didn't just blindly obey him.
Yeah, but that's the mythology, right?
Okay.
Right. So the mythology, of course, is that Moses leads the people and they do whatever they tell them to do. Except when you actually read the text, and every 10 minutes, the people are saying, why did you schlep us from the desert? We could have died in Egypt. It would have been better.
Right.
Well, but eventually they do everything God wants.
Or they die.
Or, yeah.
It's an interesting, we'll obey you the way we obey Moses. It's like, thanks. It's like, thanks for nothing. It's like, that doesn't make me feel any better. But
I think we still have to remember this is the next generation. These are not the ones that said we should have stayed in Egypt, because this is the generation that was born in the desert.
Okay, no. Hold on to that. Hold on. I keep going with that. So what does this actually prove?
This proves that we have a generation that's looking for leadership.
It proves that the whole saga of the Exodus worked.
Walk around for 40 years and
right? That the entire purpose of the wandering for 40 years was to get them to a place where they can say this.
Okay.
Right? Where they understand that this is what that
Right.
Because as slaves, they were still, we should go back to Egypt.
Right.
Nobody here in this section is saying, you know what? Fight, let's go back to Egypt.
No, because all the fetchers die.
Right.
But it's the mentality that has shifted.
Yeah.
But weirdly enough, who knows what happened in Egypt for 40 years, and it might actually be better in Egypt now.
It doesn't matter.
Right, I know.
Right, but the mentality of the people has shifted, and partly I think that's what we need here literarily in the text to show the progression. Right, we've got to end the slaves, and we have to end Moses, because Moses is part of that story, and now we need the next generation, and now we need Joshua, who is going to lead, and the people are going to follow because they understand the structures and the possibilities that you can have if you follow the directions.
Gandalf needed to die.
Right? But you do need, and healthy organizations and whatever need those transitions. You need different leaders at different times. There are some leaders you don't ever need, but that's another thing.
You said you studied interim leadership. You see Joshua mimicking any principles that you learned in that?
No, he doesn't. They don't do interim leadership. They do succession leadership.
Oh, okay.
It's a different style.
Different thing.
Right? It's a different thing, because over many years,
Right.
Joshua takes on this sense of
That's
leadership
true.
so that the
Yeah.
people are comfortable with him.
Right.
They grow up understanding that this is what's happening, right? And then at the time what's one of the most significant things a new leader can and should do?
Ensure a successor. So
Do
there's
it differently. No, just do it differently than your predecessor.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the worst words that a new leader can hear is, well, that's not the way we used to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've never heard that before.
He said he's never heard that before.
No, but before that, what was?
That's the way we used it.
Oh. I mean, the whole thing reminds me of, I'm thinking of the Lubavitchers and Rabbi Schneerson, because they had a problem with the successor and they're a mess.
They continue to have a problem.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So their problem is that he was the appointed leader or accepted leader. And then throughout his leadership, they elevated him into a sense of, they almost deified him.
Right.
I mean, they made him, there's a whole group of them, a huge group of them that believe he is the Messiah.
Right.
Right.
Right. And therefore, what's the problem? The huge problem with that is you can't find a replacement.
Right.
And so what do you do? And so, they're in a huge, they have now a council of leadership that deals with this and everything else, but they don't have a particular leader. And that is very problematic for them.
Right.
Right. The job announcement for interim Moshiach.
Right? Save us now for just a bit. All right, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Akasha.